evening. I'm Michael Berns. It's an honor to contribute to this event. I'm not quite sure why I was invited. Maybe it's due to the fact that my father was born just outside Wrocław. Maybe it's due to the fact that I've been close to the guys from Plug for a number of years, or maybe it's due to your timekeeping, which I would struggle to improve even from a German perspective. So, I mean, this is just from that side. So what I wanted to do is to give you a little bit of a different perspective, thinking about inspiration from technology and innovation in combination. So just a little bit about myself. I spent about a decade in some of the big corporates like Morgan Stanley and Moody's and others, then kind of going back into education. And then I became very keen to apply those MBA skills to startups. It's just a great playground, a great environment where you can use those marketing, those strategy, many other skills, and help people to build a new company. I still have a day job. It's working for Digital Reasoning, like we heard. It's a 18-year-old startup, but one with 100 million funding, working with the likes of Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley and other banks in that case. So when we think about innovation, in many ways, and we've seen a lot of presentations today, and when you think about how corporates perceive that, staying with the James Bond theme, it's a little bit like a casino where there's way too much noise, a lot of colors, lots of things being thrown at them, and they have to kind of navigate in this, and they have to kind of find the solution that fits for them personally. So what you see many times is kind of like this jump to how do we get those funky reports, how do we get to these funky insights, forgetting sometimes that you have to walk before you can run. And that walking for me comes from data, and it's a little bit boring maybe, but it's about how much of it you have, the quality and so on. Our former CTO would typically say, in God we trust, everybody else needs to bring data. And when you think about data science, there's some truth in that for sure. For me personally, given my background, the area where I've got most expertise is kind of like the FinTech, financial technology. And some of you work in that area in London. You will find it's a very busy ecosystem. Just to kind of think about it, you've got more than 1,000 companies in that space, where there's just endless possibilities out there in terms of what solutions are there, and same with supply chain, healthcare, many other areas in London. We just had the panel discussion also on AI, where we talked about Cambridge Analytica. It's just good to remember that a lot of those cutting-edge things that we do are in some ways experiments in the lab, like we see here. And it's a technology that is out there as a tool, like the internet itself. It can be used for the good and the bad. It depends on what the intention of the people is that are using it. For me, when we come back to the topic of inspiration, I just want to give you a couple of use cases that inspire me in my time working in this innovation area. And then I hope we can kind of close with some ideas for yourself in terms of what are the things where you want to add value to. So just as we kind of look into this, the reason why the banks are heavily investing in that area is not necessarily because they're the most innovative players in the world. It's more that this industry has been heavily disrupted, not only in the UK, where we're looking at some of the regulatory fines here with 200 million per bank, but then you look globally, US, SEC, you see $1 billion per bank. So clearly there's an outside pressure for that industry, regulatory driven, to do something and to use better tools, better means to catch the bad guys. When I say the bad guys, I'm talking about manipulation in LIBOR, FX, client money, money laundering, a lot of those areas where it's very difficult for them to kind of come to the conclusion. Most of you have heard about NLP in terms of getting insights from unstructured information. What we do as a company, and Google and many others, is kind of really looking at who are the main actors in a certain unstructured text, what is their behavior, and what are the patterns. And you can do that in a newspaper article, you can do that in a Bloomberg chat where somebody is telling the other one to trade Blue Eagle or to just do something before the fix in the market. In the end, you look at petabytes of data created over a couple of days in some of the bigger banks, and you're trying to come to insights from these massive amounts of noise if you want unstructured data. What you do is, in a very kind of intelligent agency style, you create profiles. I mean, this is a big profile here, but essentially you try to see who are the main actors in there, who are the companies behind them, what is the intended behavior and language, and come to insights in terms of who is trading those companies, who is trying to do what. So this is just from the financial services industry. Let's take a kind of a switch over to healthcare. Again, you have an industry where maybe itself it's not the most innovative and creative and results-driven part, but because of the costs in terms of the GDP, when you look at US, for example, getting close to 20% over time of GDP is spent on healthcare, there's enormous pressure there to innovate and to help them with the cost savings. And whether or not May's 20 billion package here will be added on to the cost for NHS. Essentially, a lot of the developing countries are somewhere around 14% or so, and you have those 6 months waiting times, maybe from some major operations, 3 months for others. What we do, and Google and many others are in the same space in some ways, is to try to help the NHS and others to speed up patient care, where based on the x-rays, based on the patient records from the doctors, you're trying to create a system where the patient can get a notification before leaving the hospital that unfortunately there might be something else that they want to have checked up on, and they can see a specialist before leaving the hospital, and therefore you don't have this 3 months waiting time, and therefore you don't have this another referral and so on. So you kind of create a system where it's commercially interesting for the hospital, but also very beneficial for the patient itself. Some of my friends in another startup, they're looking for using micro expressions to offer something different in terms of candidates, interviews, and so on. When you think about some of the big corporates, they might be getting 500,000 applications a year. It's very difficult for them to kind of stay close to their candidates, try to spend time having personal interaction with each one of them, or even interview them. So with that system, you could potentially interview a lot more using robots or using a video conferencing system, but then kind of really tying the actions and the body language back to the words and see if the candidate is real. Last but not least, and that was maybe one of my reasons to join this particular company, is a charity use case or working with the government in the US, where the same technology that you've just seen for financial services, building a very rich profile based on behavior and intent and language, is then being used by Thorn and some other charities to track down human trafficking. So that is Ashton Kutcher, the actor, making a statement in the Senate, using that solution for 3 years. They have freed more than 6,000 people from that. So, when I think about it, yes, I'm a financial expert, but there are so many other things that this cutting edge technology, whether it's blockchain, AI, and others, can be used for that can help mankind. And it's kind of like this partnership on AI, many other initiatives where maybe you spend some of your free time, some after hours, thinking about what is your expertise, where can you add value. And for me, that comes really then down to the world is your oyster. You need to find the pearls and find out what is your niche in that. So kind of, I've given you my story, but what's your story? What's kind of the things that inspire you? And it would be nice if after all this event, you go and think about, you have got this technology brain, how can you give back a little bit to society and make it a better place?